One of the secrets in the anthropological community is that the oldest skulls ever unearthed in the Americas are long and thin, like the heads of Caucasoid people of today. This is contrasted with the more recent or later appearing skull types, which are the broader, wider skulls, of the type which belong to American Indians, Mexican mestizos, Eskimos and Central and South America Indians. Going beyond the age of 9,000 years, one simply does not find the wide broad skull types characteristic of people often referred to as American Indians or indigenous peoples. What they find instead are skulls of the long, thin Caucasoid type. Again, these long thin skulls, like the skull of the 9,400-year-old Kennewick man, are referred to by anthropologists as dolichocephalic. That there have been approximately 20 such skulls unearthed in the Americas will be surprising to the vast majority of viewers outside of the anthropological community, and serve as an unfortunate testament to the politically correct censorship which has infected our institutions of learning, government, and media. However, at times, the truth does emerge from mainstream sources, as follows. Dr. Silvia Gonzalez, Mexican anthropologist, who led the research team which radiocarbon dated the oldest human skull found in the Americas, has said, quote, "My research could have implications for the ancient burial rites of North American Indians because it's quite possible that dolichocephalic man existed in North America well before the native Indians." End quote. Again, as a reminder, the term dolichocephalic refers to long and thin skulls of the Caucasoid type. Further, Dr. James Chatters, forensic anthropologist and first scientist to examine Kennewick man, stated, quote, "On the physical characteristics alone, he could fit on the streets of Stockholm without causing any kind of notice, or on the streets of Jerusalem or New Delhi, for that matter." This same scientist is also on record referring to the prominent characteristics of Kennewick man's skull, and stating in his initial examination that, quote, "Of the characteristics, there were 9 that fit the Caucasoid pattern. 0 fit the Mongoloid." End quote. More bluntly, the forensic anthropologist Dr. Catherine J. McMillan reported to the Benton County Coroner's Office in Washington on Kennewick man and concluded that he was, in quotes, "a Caucasian male." End quotes. From another researcher, Dr. David Glenn Smith, a genetics researcher from UC Davis, commented about the Kennewick man controversy. Quote, "Native Americans have, by orthodoxy, been regarded as Asiatic in origin. Kennewick opens up the opportunity or the likelihood, the possibility, that this was not the entire picture. That there has been at least one additional migration from Europe." End quote. In 1998, Dr. Smith from UC Davis was also quoted in the publication Science, in April 24 on page 520 that, quote, "The connection between Europe and ancient America looks pretty good." End quote. World-renowned anthropologists, Doug Ousley, of the National Museum of Natural History in Washington, D.C., and Richard Jentz of the University of Tennessee are also on the record commenting on findings that the oldest skulls found in North America are actually long and thin, and unrelated to current-day Native Americans. They stated, quote, "We were impressed with how different the older skulls are from any of the modern-day groups," says Ousley. "They do not have the broad faces, they do not have the big, prominent cheekbones that you think of as the more traditional features of the Chinese and American Indians. Instead they looked more like the inhabitants of, say, Indonesia, or even Europe." End quote. Last of all, an international team of anthropologists, headed by Dr. Loring Brace from the University of Michigan, statistically analyzed craniofacial measurements of over 1,000 prehistoric and modern skulls from all over the world. This was one of the largest studies of its kind, and their findings were published in 2001 in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences of the United States of America. In the abstract of that article, the following quote should be noted. "The first entrance to the Western Hemisphere of maybe 15,000 years ago gave rise to the continuing native inhabitants south of the U.S. and Canadian border. These show no close association with any known mainland Asian population. Instead they show ties to the Ainu of Hokkaido and their Jomon predecessors in prehistoric Japan and to the Polynesians of remote Oceania. All of these also have ties to the Pleistocene and recent inhabitants of Europe. with roots in both the northwest and the northeast. These people can be described as Eurasian." End quote. In other words, this research found that the oldest skulls appear most similar to Europeans, the Ainu and a subset of Polynesians, all of which are essentially Caucasoid or dolichocephalic in skull shape. Further, what they found is that the later arrivals appear more Chinese from the Asian mainland, or what is known as brachycephalic. These later arrivals are the ancestors of Native American Indians, Mestizo Mexicans and Central and South American Indians. Continuing, on page 10,020, this article also notes similar findings from genetics researchers such as the research of Dr. Michael Brown et al. Published in 1998, which places European DNA markers in the Americas between 12,000 and 36,000 years ago. Both the genetic research and Dr. Brace's skull shape analysis tend to clearly overlap with and support each other's findings. Dr. Brace and co-authors stated toward the end of their article on page 10,020, quote, "An independent sign of that possible ancient continuity can be seen in the distribution of the X lineage of mitochondrial DNA that is present in low frequencies in Europe and across North America to the descendants of the pre-Columbian inhabitants of the Great Lakes area." Again, these researchers are saying that the oldest skulls found in the Americas are long and thin, like the heads of white Western Europeans or the Eurasian-appearing Ainu of today. Further, they explicitly noted that genetics researchers have found that European DNA markers have also been found in American Indian populations, pointing to a prior migration of Caucasian peoples to the Americas between 12,000 and 36,000 years ago. In other words, the DNA evidence and anthropological findings support each other, and point to Europe. These DNA findings will be reviewed later in full, in this video. For the uninitiated, this will probably be quite shocking indeed. This runs counter to how nearly all of us were taught about the original migration to the Americas, the messages which are transferred to us in the media, and the laws which favor so-called indigenous peoples of the Americas, because they were allegedly first. The research in fact shows the exact opposite. That the Asiatic peoples who are now referred to as indigenous or American Indians, Mexican mestizos, Central American and South American Indians were latecomers, preceded by an earlier complex migration of Caucasoid European peoples from the France and Spain region of Europe and the Caucasoid peoples who originally inhabited parts of Japan, the Ainu. Read the research, it's online and much of it can be accessed in full.